Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I am here today to talk to you about the 48, or maybe just 48, a blended malt from Heroes Heretics, an independent bottling company. Before I tell you what this tastes like, and it does taste very nice indeed, let me give you a little bit of information, very little to be honest, about Heroes Heretics themselves, and also the constituent parts of this tasty whiskey. Heroes Heretics was founded in 2015. They're an independent bottling company based in London, sourcing casks of whiskies and rums from Scotland, America and the Caribbean. The 48 is a brandy bottled at 48% ABV, which they believe is an ideal alcohol level to enjoy whiskies. This particular release is a blended malt featuring 3 malt whiskies from highly regarded distilleries that cannot be named. The age statement given on the label is 10 years old, meaning that this is the minimum age of the whiskies within. One of the distilleries is based on Orkney, which narrows it down to either Scapa or Highland Park. Another is one of the biggest selling Speyside whiskies in the world, particularly in auction houses. And the third is another Speyside distillery known for its unusual shaped bottles that really catch the eye. So that might give you a little bit of a clue as to the 3 distilleries within. I am not going to tell you what they are. We can obviously narrow down the Orkney one to Scapa or Highland Park. One of the Speyside distilleries is massively popular, demanding very high prices at auction houses, lots of fakes out there as well. And the third is a pretty well-known distillery. It's very highly regarded, owned by a very well-known kind of wine shop, I suppose you call them, based down in London. Very distinctive shaped bottles. I don't have any on the shelf, so it's not like I could even go, oh, you can see it in the background. Anyway, so it's a blended malt. So single malt whiskies from 3 different distilleries that are blended together. So blended malts kind of get a bad reputation. They're sort of they're not shoved in with single malts. They tend to be a bit more expensive because you don't have the reduced costs of including a grain whiskey in as you would with a blended whiskey. And it's one of these things that blended malts used to be called vatted malts. You had single malt whiskey, malted barley from a single distillery. You had what was called vatted malts. So it was a blending of malt whiskies from various distilleries, and then blended whiskey, which was a combination of malt whiskey from various distilleries and also grain. Grain whiskey would give you a slightly kind of harsher feel to it. Generally speaking, grain whiskey is a little bit harsher when it's younger, but it's cheap to make. You use a column still to make grain whiskey, so you can make a lot of it. Cost of production are a lot lower, which means that you essentially can use malt whiskies as your flavour profile, kind of giving you the complexity, and the grain whiskey is almost filler. And it's why the likes of Grouse and Bells and everything are really quite cheap, because they have a bit more grain whiskey in it. That keeps the cost lower. Blended malt vatted malts, then the Scotch Whisky Association, in the infinite wisdom, decided that vatted malt is too confusing. We're going to simplify matters by having single malt, and blended whiskey. Didn't make things that easier at all. Anyway, blended malt, because you are buying or using malt whiskies from various distilleries, you don't have that luxury of having your cheaper grain whiskey to then knock the cost down. So a lot of people kind of clump blended malts with blended whiskies and then separate single malt as, single malt is proper whiskey. Blended whiskies we don't want to know about. Blended malts, well, that must be the same as blended whiskies. It's obviously the stuff that they don't want to use. Well, no, and arguably blended malts actually can give you the best parts of what whiskies are being used from each individual distillery. As this is the best part of this distillery and the best aspect of this distillery, and they work really well together. So if you're watching this and either never had a blended malt, or people that kind of go, well, blended malt, no, it's not proper whiskey or anything like that, honestly, give it a go. There are some fantastic blended malts out there that really do kind of suffer because nobody really knows how to market them. The price point, a lot of people are going, so this is $54.99, and people are going to be looking at that going, well, it's a 10-year-old at $54.99. How can it be that expensive, particularly when it's not one single distillery? Well, no, but Heroes Heretics have taken 3 different distilleries, very good distilleries, don't get me wrong, and they have blended them together to make a fantastic whiskey bottled at 48%, and the cost is $54.99. That's how much it has cost them in terms of their cost of production of sourcing the cask and going through the process and all this lot. So just because it says 10-year-old on the label doesn't mean that it has to be 35 quid. I mean, look at Macallan 10-year-old, for example, although it's not a 10, it's a 12. But, you know, there are 10-year-old single malts out there that are more than 54 quid. Bladnoch, off the top of my head, is that much, you know, is slightly more expensive as a 10-year-old, maybe about the same price. This is the way the whiskey market is going. So, you know, deal with it. This is not expensive when you know, and I know what's in this, I know this is not expensive for what is in it. So, let me tell you what it tastes like after all that rambling. On the nose. So there's a really nice warm oak feel to it initially, but you then start to get a slight, it's not a smokiness, but there is a sort of like a sweet barbecue-y feel to it, but it's very, it's not an intense peatiness, it's not obvious, and it's sort of, that you start off with warm oak, there's a touch of brown sugar in there, and toffee, and then just towards the end on the aroma you get this extra dimension of sort of like a sweet barbecue sauce type feel. You know, it's like a slight it's like the embers quite a while, just when they're kind of still warm. You know, you can put your hand over the embers of a barbecue and, you know, get quite close to the ash and almost pick it up and it's still warm, but that sort of sense of a barbecue still lingers in the air. It's really nice. There's a good kind of balance between slightly drying oak, but not overly kind of like harsh, and a toffee sweetness, and then this underlying sweet smokiness as well. And on the palate, what's on the nose pretty much continues. So it starts off with a slightly drying oak to start with, which then softens. You get that toffee, classic sherry. So like one of the Speyside, in fact both Speysiders are really well known for sherry maturation in particular, and what starts off as a drying oak softens almost instantly into lovely toffee. There's that beautiful maltiness that you associate with classic Speysiders. There's a real kind of like Cheerios in milk feel to it, and as on the nose, the smokiness, which is a little more pronounced on the palate than it was on the aroma, the smokiness then starts to come through on the finish. And what it's doing is drawing out that finish. It really is giving you a really soft sort of white pepper, but a very, very gentle white pepper. A touch of salt on there. You know, it really is quite evocative of, this is where that Orkney distillery is coming in, and it has that sweet smokiness that is very evocative of the distillery that is involved. You might know what the distillery is from my descriptions. I'm not saying it, but you'll then be going, oh, okay, this is a good distillery. Scapa and Highland Park are fantastic distilleries, but you know, you'll be like, oh, it's that one. So yeah, that kind of bonfirey, but it's like a sweet, almost honeyed bonfire on it. It's like a, I don't know, like a gammon joint that's kind of coated in honey that's been kind of smoke roasted on a barbecue. It's lovely sweetness to it, and that smokiness is drawing everything out. This could have fallen a bit flat on the finish. It would be like oak, then cherry, and then it just kind of dies off a bit, which, to be honest, the very popular Speyside one can do. It's like very upfront sherry and it just sort of tails off a bit. That combination of the three, and I think what you're actually finding with the flavour profile here is this starts off with one distillery, turns into the other distillery in Speyside, and then finishes off with the distillery on Orkney. You get a really good representation in three distinct parts of the three whiskies, the three distilleries that are associated with this blended malt. It's a fantastic kind of representation of what those three offer and how well they work together, because you get a definite progression of flavours. You really do get a journey from each distillery. It starts off with a slightly drying oak, almost like an orange marmalade feel to it from part one. Then in the middle third, you get that sweet sherry malty, what people would associate with, you know, what does Speyside taste like? Impossible to answer, but as a massive generalization of what Speyside whiskies are represented by, you get sweet sherry, malt and toffee, and then you start to get this lovely kind of slightly sweet bonfire, gentle bonfire, kind of like slightly off in the distance, barbecuey smokiness coming through. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like heavily peated or anything like that. The smokiness that's on there is really gentle, lifting those flavors up. It's very much not in your face. It's providing a support rather than going, here's the smoke, people, here we go. Brilliantly balanced. There's a fantastic progression of flavors going through this, and this as an example of a blended malt that can show you what individual distilleries can do and also how well they work together. Great example of what blended malts can achieve. And you know, this should be used an example of, okay, blended malts get a really bad reputation, this is why they shouldn't. I think the price is fair, knowing what distilleries are involved in it. The flavor profile is going, yes, it's well worth that money. I had it on a deal when I got it in. It's not to say it's never going to go on a deal back again, and it was, you know, I knocked a fiver off. But to be honest, 54 quid. I think it looks really nice as well. It's quite a sort of standout bottle. They do go on about the kind of this being involved in like an 80s vibe and things like that. Now, I grew up in the 80s. I'm not sure I get that, but it's certainly a distinctive bottle and it certainly looks the part as well. So highly recommended. I really do. If you like sort of Speyside whiskies, but you're looking for something just with a little bit more interest, or just something a little bit more unusual that, you know, you're not going to find everywhere, I really do recommend the 48. I think it's fantastic. It would make a great gift as well. I think it will be something that people go, oh, what's this? And, you know, never seen anything like this before, and it tastes absolutely fantastic. So really good start. You know, I'm actually going to do 3 videos where we go through the Heroes and Heretics that I've got. And to be honest, Heroes and Heretics as a brand, I kind of look at their website and think, oh, it's a bit kind of like marketing bullshit nonsense. It's, you know, there's not really a lot of depth in terms of who the people are involved in Heroes and Heretics. But ultimately, the most important thing is what it is like inside the bottle. And if the stuff inside the bottle is good, you can have all the marketing puff pieces in the world. Fine, whatever floats your boat, make yourself sound really impressive. But if the liquid inside is no good, then I'm going to not bother with you. And the liquid inside this is very good, which is why it's on my shelf. So it is available to purchase. www.spiritspecialist.com. We offer UK nationwide delivery, or you can click and collect from the store in East Yorkshire. Fantastic stuff. Highly recommend it. And I shall see you at the next video, which is probably going to be another Heroes and Heretics. Cheers.